Hey everybody, this is Brian Israel Newman from Hebrew Hearts. I drive all the time, if you can't tell. On the YouTube, we have little segments like Whitestone Letters, which is about identity and these things. And we have Twilight Parables, which is dream interpretation. And have a new little series on here called Spirit Lessons, just like spiritual concepts, or it's kind of deeper. And we'll probably have some Torah stuff eventually. But as far as spirit lessons go, I saw this thread conversation earlier about just how wicked the world's getting. And a case can be made the world's always been wicked, and a lot of things that are evil or wicked or whatnot are cultural. And that doesn't make them even any less evil, it just means that it's culturally accepted. The Romans and Greeks did things we'd find atrocious. Most of them were atrocious, but it was a culturally accepted thing. Just the whole culture has very ungodly values. But then there are certain things, like things we've seen in the news recently, that would appall Greeks and Romans and Babylonians, and they would just be appalling and wicked almost anywhere in history. That would just be an evil, wicked thing. And because it surpasses even where the society is at. And I think part of why these things happen is 2 Corinthians 4 says we are earthen vessels. We're jars of clay. We're jars of clay. And that also goes along with the Japanese concept and some other ancient concepts that a human being is a vessel. You're a spirit vessel. Your body is made of flesh, which is made of dust. And it's a spirit vessel. You're a container for a spirit. And so it's an empty container is always a vacuum. If you have an empty vase or empty vase, depending on which dialect you speak, you have an empty vase sitting on a table, it's going to fill with some air. In Greek and Hebrew and in most languages, air and spirit are the same word. So an empty vase is a vacuum. You have a lid on it, you take the lid off, it's going to fill with something. It's going to fill with some kind of air, some kind of spirit. If you're a human being. So a natural vase fills with air because there's a vacuum, there's empty space in it. Whatever is available will fill that empty space in a clay vase or a glass vase, porcelain vase made of earth. A human being is also a vessel, and it's going to fill with something, some kind of spirit. So a natural object will fill with air if it's empty, like a natural vase made out of earth will fill with air. A human being, also made out of earth, will fill with some kind of spirit. It will not remain empty. Something will fill it up. So a vase, a natural vase, could fill with high quality, clean, filtered air, like the Holy Spirit, or it could fill with smog, or it could fill with cigarette smoke, or it could fill with smoke from a fireplace, or it could fill with toxic fumes. It could fill with any other kind of air, like multiple kinds of spirits. A human being, being a vessel of clay, also fills with one spirit or the other. It will not remain empty. So a human being can be filled with the spirit of the Creator, the Holy Spirit, or it can be filled with multiple other types of spirits. But it's always going to pull in some kind of spirit. And if it's not full of the Holy Spirit, it will pull in a different spirit. If it's only 50% full of the Holy Spirit, the Ruach HaKodesh, then it will be 50% full of a different spirit. And the only way to keep an alternate spirit out of it is to fill it full of the Holy Spirit. So if the Holy Spirit was pure, clean air, and that vessel's only filled for 80% full of clean, full air, there's 20% room for smog or cigarette smoke or toxic fumes. But if you pump more clean air into the vessel, it pushes out all the rest because there's no more room for it. Or transversely, if you pump enough cigarette smoke into it, there will be no more room for the clean air. So we understand we're vessels, and if there's any space at all inside of us left, not filled with some kind of spirit, then some kind of spirit will come fill that space. Either the Holy Spirit or a different spirit, some kind of spirit or influence will come in there and fill that space up. And people throughout the ancient world always knew this, and that's why everybody's some kind of spiritual. And there are a lot of people who don't claim to be religious or have any kind of spiritual beliefs or pursuits, but everyone does. They might rename it, like a lot of ecology is repackaged Wicca. Secular humanism is repackaged Gnosticism. These are all just modern terms for ancient beliefs being repackaged, but they're still spiritual beliefs. They usually come down to Wicca or Gnosticism, or Buddhism or Hinduism, but they all come down to being a spiritual belief of one kind or the other, because there is no vacuum, there is no true atheist. Any human vessel will fill one spirit or the other, if not by decision, by default. And filling yourself with the Holy Spirit is a decision. And if you don't make that decision by default, there will be multiple other spirits will try to gain access. With that being said, all ancient cultures also understood there are ways to fill that vessel. Even when ancient people made a idol out of wood or stone or whatever, they knew this item is nothing. It's usually, some of them I guess thought their idol was something, but it's an idol made out of wood or stone or gold or whatnot. And then they understood that it's an empty vessel. Like a human being, it's an empty vessel. So they went through a ceremony or a ritual or a procedure in order to put a spirit in that vessel. They would usually breathe into its nose or put an inscription in its head. The Egyptians called it Ba. They tried to do an incantation to summon a spirit to say, hey, look, spirit, that's an empty vessel. You need to go in there and fill that thing with their objects. And people throughout history have always done it as humans with their bodies. And what invites these different spirits? Certain things attract certain spirits, certain things repel certain spirits. Like in scriptures, anything unclean will repel the Holy Spirit. And when you repel the Holy Spirit, that leaves space for other spirits. Like eating something unclean, it doesn't make you permanently unclean, but while it's in your system, until it flushes out of your system, it can repel the Holy Spirit. If you come in contact with the dead, if you come in contact with blood, if you come in contact with certain diseases, these things can offset the Holy Spirit a little bit. But even more so, if something inside, those are mostly outside the vessel things. Like if something touches the outside of the vase, that's one thing. That's like ceremony. That's something outside the vase. That's one thing. But when something's inside the vase, inside the vessel, that makes it multiple times more unclean. So if something in there is greedy, or hateful, or unforgiving, or lustful, or deceitful, the Holy Spirit doesn't want to be inside the vessel with that thing. Like, would you want to be in a room with a dead possum on on the floor, or would you want to be in a room? Would you want to be in a bathroom having been cleaned in 6 weeks, or that's just totally a toilet that wasn't flushed? You wouldn't want to be in a room or in a space with something unclean, something dying, something decaying, something that stinks. And if the Holy Spirit doesn't want to be in a space, trapped in a space with something unclean, decaying, and dying either. So what's outside the vessel is one thing, but when it's inside the vessel, that's a whole other thing. And so you can keep if you keep the inside of the vessel clean, scripturally clean, the Holy Spirit wants to be there more. But if you bring dead things, decaying things, things that stink to Him inside your vessel, then He's not there as much. And that leaves room for other kind of spirits actually attracted to those things. Like the human being would usually run away from a room with a dead animal on the floor, like a dead rat or something. But there are certain other kinds of animals, creatures that would flock to that. A human being might not want to be in that room, but roaches would, or vultures, or any kind of scavenger animal would want to be in there. Because to them, that's appealing. If your space or your vessel has something dead or dying, the demonic world loves that. The demonic world is always pictured as predators, that, and they act like viruses, bacteria as well, but the demonic world loves to inhabit a space that has something unclean in it, something dead, or something dying. They love to inhabit those spaces. And if something like that is in your vessel or in your space, it pushes the Holy Spirit out and it attracts these other spirits. Because there's room for them, and there's also something there appealing to them. So ancient people throughout history found ways to either invite certain kinds of spirits, or repel certain kinds of spirits based on their objectives. And how do they do that? Music's always been big. Music creates an atmosphere. It's like incense. It creates an atmosphere that can either be appealing to a certain spirit or repelling to a certain spirit. It creates an inviting atmosphere, because the purpose of music was invitation. It would invite a spiritual summon, and invite and welcome a spiritual presence. Depending on the kind of music, you could invite a certain presence or repel a certain presence. So if it invites the Holy Spirit, it pushes or repels the demonic spirits. But if it repels the Holy Spirit, then it not only leaves a vacuum for demonic spirits to fill, it might actually invite them in. Other things are ritual foods. There were things people ate. Not that it made them more spiritual, but certain things they avoided eating. Every culture, every religion in history almost had certain things they avoided eating. Good or bad, but not just Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Every culture had certain things they ate or didn't eat for religious purposes. So that was huge. Also, there's always rules about sex. The pagans wanted to invite all these different presences, like they wanted to invite Aphrodite or Venus or Ashtoreth or Asherah or any of these sex goddesses in history. They basically had an orgy to invite that spirit into that geographic space, and also into that building, and also into their bodies. That's what they were inviting in. And in the Song of Solomon, sex was a spiritual experience. It's a holy experience. But between man and wife in covenant, when it was done in covenant, in a way invited the Holy Spirit. It showed all these spiritual examples, all these spiritual pictures. And so there's sex, there's food, there's music, and there's different kinds of ceremonies people went through. Usually cleansing ceremonies of one kind. In scriptures, they took a mikvah, took a baptism. They went to this washing in order to remove anything not pleasing to the Holy Spirit, either actually or symbolically, a symbolic act to remove anything not pleasing the Holy Spirit, so the Holy Spirit would be more attracted there. It would, like a vase that's clean and shiny and polished, would be more attractive than when covered in mud and blood and such. And when some of the devotees of Mithra and ancient religions, they coat themselves in blood. I mean, they would be underground, under this, and there's like an iron grate in the ceiling with a cow on top, and they would slit the cow's throat and be washed in its blood. And to them, that was cleansing themselves to be inhabited by Mithra, the spirit of Mithra. And then the opposite was, the Hebrews washed with water to be able to be more pleasing to the Holy Spirit. And there are things people did to mark their spaces, their houses, to be more acceptable. I know that the Hebrews put to accept or repel certain spirits. The Hebrews put the blood on the lamb on their doorposts to show that house is marked as protected to that space, not just their individual clay vessels, but their physical house where all those human beings, those clay vessels lived. It's marked by the blood of a lamb to repel the death angel, to keep him away, because he saw the mark of authority on the door. But the pagans would mark their doors with, like the Druids, had a radish, or radishes, turnips. They would carve out this turnip, make a scary face on it, and if you were under a curse, if they wanted the demons to go to your house because you upset the community, these Druid priests would carve this turnip out and put it on your porch, or your front door. They put it in front of your house, by your doorpost, to summon spiritual beings to that location to cause havoc. And later on, the Irish got to America, and pumpkins were much more available, so they started carving out pumpkins. There was a mark on that house to invite demonic presences to come and cause havoc. And the ancient Romans put a wreath on the door. It's a symbol of their fertility goddess, a circle, but it's a symbol of fertility, that they want the fertility goddess to come in and make sure their wife got pregnant. So they put this wreath on the door to invite the Roman fertility goddess to come and hang out with them, to come into their space. The Jews had the mezuzah, which is it's got the sheen, the letter, looks like call it the letter for God, but it's one of the Hebrew letters, and it's got a little tiny scroll in it, Deuteronomy 6, and that is a symbol of the Creator, Yahweh. Adonai is the protector of the house, to invite His Spirit in and to protect that house, to show He's welcome there. It's a welcome mat, and it's also a mark of authority, showing that the house belongs to Him. Because as humans in 2018 in America, we have this concept of like no spiritual world, that there are just spaces and places where there is spiritually neutral, but nothing's ever spiritually neutral, or rarely spiritually neutral. Yeshua said, if you're not with me, you're against me. And there is no spiritual neutrality. Every vessel is constantly trying to be, every human being is a vacuum, and there's a constant push and pull to influence that person. But it's like if there's a vase that's empty, there's a vase in the house, you take the lid off, the clean air is going to push to come in, and the smoke-filled air is going to push to come in. And whichever takes up the most space leaves less space for the other. And a human being's like that. There's always a spiritual pull for these spiritual forces to take up that space. And it usually comes down to, which one do you want there more? And you can make it more welcoming for one spirit, and repel the other spirit, or more welcoming for this spirit and repel the other spirit. But our choices, our attitudes, our actions, our thoughts, our symbols, our rituals, even what we take into our bodies, what we do with our bodies, all welcomes one kind of spirit and repels a different kind of spirit, and proportionally. So what we are filled with is always somewhat up to us, by our choices, by our actions. A lot of things we don't do because we have no idea how effective they are, and a lot of things we do because we have no idea how destructive they are. We have no concept of the spirit world. We have no concept that things are attracting spiritual forces or repelling spiritual forces. We have no concept that you're a vessel, and one spirit or the other is always tangling to try to take up the space in you. And everything you do is also either pushing away a certain kind of spirit, either a good one or a bad one, or it's pulling in a certain kind of spirit, a good one or a bad one. And we're always constantly marking our territory. Marks are there, marking their territory. We are saying by what we put on our doors, what we put on our houses, sometimes what we put on our bodies, in our bodies, do with our bodies, and with our words, and with everything we do, that we are claiming, I belong to this or this. I belong to Yahweh, or I belong to humanism, or I belong to Wicca, or I belong to whatever. But we're always marking ourselves and our houses and our lives and our minds and our hearts some kind of way. Because everything in the spirit world is always looking for a symbol. It's always looking for a mark. It's always looking to see who put the big sign up saying where it belongs. But who's putting the welcome home up for that kind of spirit? Who is saying, you are welcome here, you belong here, this place belongs to you, this space belongs to you. We want you in this space. And we subconsciously, we put these things up all the time. We have no idea what they mean. So that gives you a little perspective, but in summary, every person is a vessel, and there's no such thing as a vacuum. So every person's a vessel that will be filled up with one kind of spirit or the other. And certain things attract spirit, a particular spirit, and by default repel the opposite kind of spirit. And there's always a struggle. Who's going to have that influence? And there's also a whole world of things that declare and welcome and invite spiritual beings that we're not aware of, that we need to pay more attention to. So I hope that helps you guys a little bit. It's a little esoteric, but I might break it down some more sometime. Shalom.